Okay, so as you saw on the bottom of the screen during the intro, there is a brief trigger warning before I turn on my camera because it's not pretty.
Not pretty's putting it mildly, but
Yeah.
yeah, folks, you be warned. It's apparently it looks worse than it is, but when we
Yeah.
eventually do an embarrassing story stream, you'll understand why I don't quite believe that.
And also, let's just say I got a Halloween costume for free a couple weeks late, but applying it was a bitch.
Yeah. Just be honest, you got into an argument with a truck shelf and lost. That's what happened.
Yeah. So, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. I swear, I'm not even in the same country. It wasn't me.
Not even on the same continent. And if they were, there would be a truck that is no longer in one piece.
Yeah, in the immortal words of Sellers, oh hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hello to Mark Caesar, who is in the chat, and of course anyone who is watching and or will be watching in the future. This is week 3 of Kubrick month, and we are covering Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Which, actually has the longest title of any film that was nominated for an Academy Award.
Okay, I have one thing to say. An overarching comment on this film.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it now. So, Americans, you do actually know how the rest of the world views you. Why haven't you done anything about it?
Yeah. Well,
like, this is spot on for how the rest of the world views the stereotypical American.
Yeah.
You've had, like, 60 years.
Well, actually,
nearly 60 years you've had.
Is Kubrick American?
No, but this was made for an American audience, and Americans saw it. Kubrick's name makes me think Polish descent, but don't quote me on that.
But also, Dr. Strangelove, unlike a lot of Kubrick's films, which were hits right out the gate, it took a while for America to warm up to Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, I can imagine. It held up a hell of a mirror.
Yeah.
This is a hell of a mirror held up to American here.
Fun fact, or not so fun fact, depending on how you view it. So Peter Sellers is famous for playing 3 roles in this film. He was signed on to play 4, but during shooting he broke his leg and couldn't play the pilot.
So basically, what we're saying is anyone who tries to do anything about this film gets injured.
No,
is that what we're saying?
So because
is this got like the whole? Is this like hunting down the mummy and is there a curse? The curse of the bomb.
And so basically, when Peter Sellers couldn't play Major Kong, Kubrick wanted like a genuine, Western star / cowboy to play him. in the running was John Wayne.
I would have paid money to see John Wayne play that part.
John Wayne turned it down because it was too left wing for him.
Yeah, that tracks.
Because I think this was about the time where he was getting ready to film and direct Green Berets.
Yeah, it's around about the same time. Yeah, so definitely not his politics.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the cast.
Yeah.
Slim Pickens, yeah.
Yeah.
So he found a bona fide cowboy.
Yeah, oh yeah, Slim Pickens was a rodeo cowboy before he made the jump to screen.
Yeah, similar story to Glenn Campbell. A lot of them did it though. A lot of the Western stars made the jump from rodeo to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because how else were they going to learn how to ride a horse?
Yeah.
But yeah. This film.
Yes, this film.
Americans, you know how the world views you. Do something about it, please.
Though I will say, certain scenes are a lot less funny nowadays.
Yeah. And certain scenes are a lot less funny when you consider the role of the president in hindsight of the last, say, 5 years.
Yeah.
There's one particular line that the president delivers that, I just realised how traumatised I am from my bastard presidency. It made me want to cry. Like the
well,
a president who gives a fuck.
Well, like for instance, like General Ripper, like pretty much all of General Ripper's scenes and diatribes are a lot less funny now.
Yeah, they're a lot less funny now. And things that were quite clearly supposed to show the audience that he was a fucking fruitcake are things that certain people are coming out with now.
Yeah.
Like, straight up. Like the whole fluoridization thing.
Yeah.
That's a lot less funny now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the whole, like, seriously, like, replace fluoridization with vaccines, and it could be a Twitter rant.
You don't have to. There is a conspiracy out there about fluoride in the water.
No, well, yeah, and there was when it was being filmed. That's what that whole spiel was.
Yeah. I will say they took fluoride out of the water where I live, and the average, like, Ring will tell you my teeth are awful.
Yeah.
Like, I'm lucky if I can go a year without needing a filling or a yank. And I don't mean an American.
Yeah, they already have a yank.
Yeah, I already have a yank. I have you. But, yeah. And I've had, I've bought, like, fluoride things to cover my teeth in and stuff to try and recover them. Because it's just, fluoride will not, like, it doesn't, the blood-brain barrier exists.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to get something from your bloodstream. From your stomach into your bloodstream that's not supposed to be there. Because that's what your stomach's for. And your digestive system's for. But then even if it does get into your bloodstream, getting it through the blood-brain barrier... There's a reason they use drills and saws to get into your skull if they need to operate on your brain.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get in there. But yeah. More on that later.
A shelf tried and it couldn't do it.
Exactly. Although,
but remember, you got to remember, blood is still part of your precious bodily fluids.
Goodbye. I couldn't. Yeah. Basically, all of this shit went down because one dude needed Viagra. That's what happened. Yeah. That's the entire plot of this movie. One dude needed Viagra and another one really needed to get laid, and that's why this happened.
Yeah.
But yeah. From the top, I want to talk about the narrator, because we only get them right at the start.
Yeah.
But it's a very classic riff on old-style newsreel cinema.
Yeah. Well, also, before that, well, one, we have the disclaimer. And apparently, I don't think that disclaimer was put there for a comedic effect.
No, but it's still funny.
Yeah. Well, because...
It's funny if you... If you understand why it's there, it's funny.
Yeah.
If you are the kind of person who needs that disclaimer, it's probably not funny.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I really like about this film. It does not talk down to the audience.
Yeah.
It doesn't over-explain itself. This film will make a joke about US-Russian relations or will make a random joke.
Yeah.
And if you don't get the joke, tough shit.
Yeah.
It carries on. It does not wait for you to catch up. And for a film from the 60s as well, it's quite fast-paced.
Yeah.
Especially given there's very few action scenes in it. It's mostly just groups talking in a set.
Yeah.
It's got, like 3 sets and... Yeah, like you've got the war room, the office, and the plane. I think those are the only plane. 3 sets.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's the broadcast room at the very beginning.
Yeah, but again, that's there for all of 5 minutes, if that. 10
yeah,
minutes,
and then of course there's the phone booth set, which is there for another 5 minutes.
Yeah, and we will get onto the Coca-Cola wars because yeah. So we've got, and that for me kind of sets the tone of this film. The disclaimer's there, and if you don't need it, it's funny, and it sets the entire tone. And it kind of, for me, I haven't watched this film since undergrad.
Yeah.
Going back 8 years, I could barely remember it.
Yeah.
The fact that it's filmed in black and white.
Yeah.
That's a stylistic choice.
Yeah.
That is not a, we don't have colour TV yet. That is a stylistic choice. Yeah. They definitely had colour cinema in 1964.
Also, the thing about it being filmed in black and white, even though it was filmed in black and white, Kubrick made sure to have the table of the war room covered in green cloth because he wanted the actors to feel like they were playing poker for the fate of the world. Yeah,
and it definitely does give off that poker vibe.
Yeah,
it really does. It is like a poker table. You can sort of see them.
Yeah.
Dealing, a game of Texas going on there, or 5-card brag. And it's a really good point. Now, we all know from, other things like The Addams Family, just because it's filmed in black and white doesn't mean the actors are seen black and white.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting stylistic choice he's made there.
Yeah.
And the thing with Kubrick is, if there's one thing we know about Kubrick by now this month, it's he doesn't do anything by accident.
Yeah.
Not something like that.
Yeah, he is meticulous.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, the black and white gives it that timelessness.
Yeah.
But it also lends it a gravitas that colour wouldn't have.
I mean, especially in the, especially in those, in the 60s when, you're more dramatic, more, where your more serious and dramatic movies were still being done in black and white. Where,
Yeah, I mean, there are still directors who would choose to film in black and white depending on what they were filming today.
Yeah.
It is a stylistic choice, and there are reasons behind that. It lends it that gravitas, which works really well with the newscaster narrator style of introduction. And it does, and even the voice of the narrator was very much, the air, it sounds like the start of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. The air raid warning sounds like this.
Yeah.
A very BBC newscaster. 50-year-old white male in a grey suit on a grey background.
Yeah.
It's very bland. But with that blandness, again, Kubrick does with this film what he did with Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
He never makes an ethical or moral judgment on what he's showing you.
Yeah.
This film doesn't tell you what to think of these people. We know it's a satire. But I can completely understand why Americans took a while to warm up to this film. Because it's a very good satire.
Yeah.
And the best satires are indistinguishable from dramas.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it wasn't originally intended to be a comedy.
I imagine it was more intended to be a dark comedy.
So what happened was when Kubrick was writing the screenplay, he was adapting it based off a novel called Red Alert, which was a suspense thriller about the Cold War accidentally going hot. Thing is, as he was adapting it, he kept on finding scenes in the book that cracked him up. So he's like, "Fuck it." He fired his co-writer and hired a different one, and they turned it into Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it is a ridiculous plot.
Yeah.
It is utterly ridiculous. Like, if you try and follow this plot straight, like, as I was watching this, I've got notes like, the primary target is ICBM, but they make computers, and then when the Doomsday Machine got explained, I was like, oh, but if they're going to destroy the computers, they'll destroy the Doomsday Machine, and,
Yeah, ICBM is Intercontinental Ballistic Missile.
Yeah, I know. But IBM is the computers.
Yes.
And ICL is the computers. It's the two big computer companies.
Yeah.
So it was one of those where, as a civilian, because I get my acronyms mixed up, I was just like, what the? I was like, why are you targeting a computer company? It's the equivalent of firing a missile at Apple HQ. Actually. No one get any ideas, but I can't tell you to do it, but
Yeah.
No, it's
that being said, so here's the thing. It's like I know we usually go, plot, through the plot, but we're already taking this very topically.
Yeah, well, this film's really difficult to take through the plot because it jumps all over the place.
Yeah. And because the film has a lot to say about computers versus humans. over.
Does. It does. Computers versus humans.
Yeah.
The thing that the film is really good at, though,
Yeah.
is never forgetting to remind you that humans programmed the computers.
Yeah.
I have to say the whole thing with the computers and the computer codes and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
There was so much focus on that I started, even though I knew they were probably entirely irrelevant to the plot, I started writing down like what the codes coming through on the computer system were on the, because the film made me give these things so much weight because it spent so much time on them. And so it was really interesting then that it finally came down to actually man versus machine, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting conundrum for a Cold War film. It's not the first Cold War film to have done it, and it definitely wasn't the last. You know, you can go all the way into sort of, you can talk about Godzilla if you want as a man versus doomsday device type.
Yeah.
You know, there's all sorts you can say about that.
And a lot has been said about how after World War II, in America, radiation gave you superpowers, but in Japan, radiation made monsters.
Yeah. And and that's purely because the American public had not had first-hand experience of radiation.
Yeah.
And to the American public, radiation was a savior. It ended the war. Or so they were told. It was actually completely unnecessary to drop either of those bombs. And Truman... This is not a discussion about what a wanker Truman was, Noodle. Chill yourself.
Though that being said, and I'm referring back to the first video of the month, 2001 isn't as clear about it because Kubrick spent the entire film being a pretentious dick. It's a great movie, but it's a terrible movie if you want to understand the plot without giving your entire attention to it.
Yeah, I feel like Kubrick missed the trick on that one, because this film, you can switch off for like 5-10 minutes at a time and pick the plot back up, and it's only an hour and a half long. And you kind of want to, because it's black and white and it's old men and it's a lot of talking and not a lot of action. And when there are action scenes, they look like someone drew them on the back of a frigging cereal box.
Yeah.
And it's really, really, it looks low budget.
Yeah.
Probably because it is.
Yeah.
But I think that's a deliberate stylistic choice as well, of it's got to look like a newsreel.
So, here's the thing. You know where half their budget went to?
I know this bit of thing. I know I've seen that. Wasn't it? Was it to pay Sellers?
Yeah, it was to pay Peter Sellers.
I mean, to be fair, the dude played 80% of the plot, so yeah.
Well, and Kubrick, Kubrick was famous for saying, we paid Sellers for three performances and we got 6 out of them.
Yeah. That's valid. That is a valid statement.
Yeah.
And if you think about how many other actors they'd need to replace him to do that film again,
Yeah.
I think a slightly younger John Cleese might have pulled it off.
Yeah.
Having seen him in things like Fawlty Towers and The Meaning of Life, he's definitely got the range to play all the different weirdo parts.
Yeah, though he isn't quite say no one is quite the vocal chameleon that
Peter Sellers is.
Yeah, that Peter Sellers was.
Yeah. I can't really think of anyone else who'd be able to pull that off.
Yeah.
You would need someone who trained as a voice actor to pull that off, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were talking about man versus machine.
Yes.
And there's this really interesting dichotomy between the idea of the doomsday machine and the bomb and you know the radios have got to be switched off and all the rest of it, and yet those same machines, when used properly, are what could have prevented all of this.
Yeah.
So for me, this film is not so much man versus machine as it is man versus man's inability to use machines appropriately.
Yeah. Though, however, there as a counterpoint to that, there is one character who is all in about using using computers to decide everything.
Yeah. That's called eugenics, folks.
Yeah.
I realised he was an ex-Nazi.
Yeah.
Then I noticed him starting to talk about the mines. And then I was like, oh shit. And it was a slow dawning realisation that in all of this, the enemy was that guy.
Yeah. Like you don't even see, Dr. Strangelove until like halfway through the movie. But as the movie progresses, those in the war room lean more and more on his expertise. Also, he becomes more and more obviously, he slips more and more, Well, yeah, it's more his mask slips further and further.
Yeah, and he's the enemy within. And I think the great thing about this film is, I hate to say it, but I can see why some people might view this as potentially straight up propaganda. Pro-American propaganda. Because what you've got is the Americans and the Russians having to make a decision about potentially letting off a hydrogen bomb. And basically what it's pointing out is that all roads lead to eugenics. Yeah. In the Cold War. In war, all roads lead to eugenics. That's what this film is pointing out. But what it's pointing out is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The Americans are agreeing to shoot their own planes down, for Christ's sake. They're giving away their secrets to the Russians over the phone.
Yeah.
And still, what's the alternative? And what's the outcome? Let's all go live in the mines with 10 women to one man, and we've got to pick them for their sex and their brains and their, and wait, I've heard that before somewhere. It's a very interesting study of how, especially during the Cold War, we did get to a point of mutually assured destruction. We were there by the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was the whole thing.
Yeah.
I say we like I was around that time. I'm not that old, I promise. I've just studied it so much. I feel like I might as well have been there.
And I mean, it was it was filmed shortly after the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah. So that's fresh in the minds of the audience. And it is one of those things whereby the film is both... It's kind of humanizing the decisions this president takes.
Yeah.
You know how I was talking about that one line from this president that made me sort of like, oh my god, there was a president who actually gave a fuck at some point. This line from him, and I wrote it down. Where did I put it?
Is it, I won't be
remembered as a man who, yeah.
Yeah, as the greatest mass murderer since Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. But then the following line is so powerful. Maybe if you cared more about the American people and less about the history books.
Yeah.
Because this guy, I can see what they're getting at. There aren't going to be history books if he doesn't make the right decision here.
Yeah.
And he's trying to make the decision that minimizes casualties. So what you have is the entire thing, which is what the general was saying when he said, war is too important to be left to the generals.
Yeah.
And now he's saying it's too important to be left to the politicians.
Yeah.
And it's that civilian versus military conflict of what is an acceptable loss.
Yeah.
As a civilian, most civilians will say there is no such thing as an acceptable loss.
Yeah.
Just no. All human life is worth the same. This is, if you don't believe in that fundamental truth, then what the hell are you fighting for?
Yeah.
Whereas the military will look at it and go, okay, but we've got 10 guys who are highly trained and it's going to cost us X number of dollars to refit them, train 10 guys to replace them, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Or we've got 2 civilians who are cowering in a corner. And it's this whole argument around the greater good and what on paper. And this is why I maintain you have to be a little bit of a psychopath to be in the top ranks of any military. You've got to be. Because, like we were talking about Full Metal Jacket last week, and we were talking about how objectively on paper, the right decision is not always the good, the moral, the ethical decision.
Yeah.
And that's what this film grapples with in a really interesting way, especially as a satire and as a dark comedy.
Yeah.
Because it's not a film that's going to make you laugh out loud. It's not that kind of comedy. It's the kind of comedy that sort of niggles at you.
Yeah.
And it's really dark, and you'll sort of huff and you'll go, huh.
Though.
Yeah, that's funny.
Though I mean, there are a few lines that will get you to laugh out loud.
Yeah, there's a few slapstick lines. There's a few really good one-liners in there.
Yeah.
Like, you can't let the Russian ambassador in here. He'll see the big board.
Yeah, or also...
I died laughing at that. That was hilarious.
In my opinion, the funniest line in any comedy ever...
You can't.
...is, gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Mm-mm. No. This film tops it, because when he's on the phone... It's like, it's the most tense situation imaginable. Yeah. They're trying to get hold of the Russian premier to try and stop nuclear Armageddon.
Yeah.
The president gets on the phone, and just the words, I think he's drunk.
Yeah.
It's just so human.
Yeah.
You've called him, like, late at night, his time.
Yeah.
He's probably drinking, he's probably got, a hooker on each arm and a glass of vodka dangling off a foot somewhere.
Yeah.
He's quite obviously at a party. Do you mind turning the music down a little bit?
Yeah.
And it's that juxtaposition of this really serious
actually,
world-ending
I
situation.
don't think it'd be late at night in Russia because it's implied to be late at night in the U.S.
Okay, Well, it's early hours in the morning in Russia, which
Yeah.
explains the, drunk. It's
Yeah.
late. When I say my late at night and your late at night are two different things. Your late at night is 10:30. My late at night is 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
My late at night is I can hear the dawn chorus. That's my late at
Yeah.
night. So I'm a night owl, guys. But and you get this all the time. The juxtaposition of normality with this absolutely fucking weird situation.
Yeah.
You've got that one. You get
I'm just as sorry as you are, Dimitri.
yeah, and even the secretary on the phone.
Yeah.
Answers in her underwear after they've quite clearly just had a round of.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it sex because she's still actually wearing her underwear, so whatever he did quite clearly didn't even mess her hair up. But, they're obviously doing it up to something, or on their way to something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, especially since he's, he tells her to start the countdown and he'll be back before she can blast off.
Yeah. I will say as well, Air Force kink.
Yeah.
Dude, that's when taking your job home's a bit too much. B, the mental image of a general in the powder room.
Yeah.
Just... it's hilarious to me because you have this mental image when someone says to you, oh, the general of the Air Force. You have this image of this, old guy, full uniform, full dress uniform, so much tin on his chest he rattles when he walks. That kind of thing.
Well,
and then he's in the powder room.
And I, especially since his name is Buck Turgidson.
Yeah. So... But to me, that mental image is just hilarious. And this film does that a lot. You get even the conversation between the British... Is he a general or is he a major?
I think he's a major.
Yeah. Between the
major
and
he's
the...
general, he's he'd be the British equivalent of a colonel. Because he's the executive...
We have colonels in Britain.
Yeah, he's the XO to General Ripper.
Yeah, I think he's I think he might be... What was his name?
He's a lieutenant colonel. Or
yeah,
at least yeah, because it's Lieutenant Colonel Mandrake.
Group Captain.
Yeah.
Group Captain Lionel Mandrake, yeah.
Yeah.
So he's Group Captain, so he's... you've got your sergeant who's in charge of you there, and then... So he's the guy who would be... I think he's 2 ranks up from sergeant, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to compare American and English militaries is really annoying.
Yeah, especially since enlisted and officers are basically 2 separate tracks.
Yeah, exactly. But he's basically the guy whoever the sergeants answers to.
Yeah.
I think. Don't quote me. It might be who the corporals answer to because our military is different and yeah.
But
it doesn't matter. He's relatively high ranking. He's the second high ranking person.
Yeah.
After Jack Ripper.
Yeah.
Who is obsessed with his bodily fluids.
I only drank. I only drink rainwater or distilled water and pure grain alcohol.
Yeah, so I find it funny that he calls it pure grain alcohol. Just call it like pure grain. It's gonna be whiskey, isn't it?
Yeah.
So basically, he drinks whiskey and water.
Yeah.
Just call it that.
No,
or was
whiskey,
there something against saying the word whiskey in the film?
Yeah, whiskey and either distilled or rainwater.
Yeah.
Because fluoridation is apparent in his mind
is a communist plot.
Well, you see, one of our generals got a little funny in the head.
It happens. No big deal, right?
Yeah.
It's all very. Again, it's that juxtaposition of these really horrible situation that's going on with these people talking like they're talking to toddlers. And there's a great quote. I can't remember who said it. Someone Google it in the chat and tell me. There's a great quote that says, I think it might be a Churchill quote, and he says, diplomacy is for our enemies. With our friends, we should be honest, basically, is what it boils down to. That's not the exact quote, but that's basically what it boils down to. And that's what you see here. Like, when they're talking to people who they're not on the same, who they don't think they're on the same side as, they really sort of, how are you doing, dear? Now, Dimitri.
Yeah.
And they're very sort of, talking to a 5-year-old and tell them, you take the first loop and you put the string over it and you pull it through, and that's how you tie your shoelaces, darling.
Yeah.
It's that kind of tone. But when they're talking to each other, it's like a brawl in the Wild West.
Yeah.
Like, quite literally. Because some of the accents are fucking... What? Also, just to make a point.
Yeah.
The Russian ambassador's Russian is right. But he speaks it with a horrendous American accent. I had to listen to it twice to understand what he was going on about because his accent was so American. And I should point out, Russian is a phonetic language. The letters of the alphabet is phonetic. So everyone should pronounce it close to the same.
Yeah.
I don't know how he managed to speak Russian in an American accent, but he managed it.
And somehow speak American in a pseudo-British accent.
Yeah. It just a really weird... I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah.
But the Russian is accurate. From what I could make out of it. So... talking about this, I want to talk about the American military's idea, or Kubrick's idea of the American military's idea of emergency provisions.
Yeah.
1 emergency prophylactic, 3 lipsticks, and 3 pairs of fishnets. What are you planning on doing when you cross the Russian border?
Well,
the pilot was right. A man could have a hell of a night out with that.
Yeah, so, and here's the thing about when how close to the Cuban Missile Crisis this was filmed. That if you watch closely, you'll see that the line, line about having a good night in Vegas is dubbed over.
Yeah.
Because the line was originally, you could have a fella could have a good night in Dallas with all that.
Oh, ouch. Oh, yeah, and this is 64 as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's just after Kennedy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
ouch.
yeah. They had to go in at the last minute and dub it over and dub Dallas over to Vegas.
Can you just put Max? I'm
That
not
one?
assuming anyone's pronouns the pilot did.
Yeah.
Although I will say, the priorities are a bit weird that there's 3 lipsticks, 3 pairs of tights, but only 1 condom.
Yeah.
You probably... if you're in a situation where you need lipstick, tights, and condoms, you're probably going to need more condoms than tights.
Yeah.
just putting that out there.
Actually, speaking from like training,
condoms have many uses.
Yeah.
They're very good for waterproofing things and stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know.
The condom isn't supposed to be used as a condom.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd make the joke.
Yeah.
Yes, Gio Sam, I think that was a Winston Churchill quote that I was talking about. Something like diplomacy for our friends, but for our enemies, but for our friends, we must always be honest. Something like that. It's either Churchill or it's Roosevelt or it's someone like that.
Yeah.
Some World War II, World War One person. I say like I'm not a historian. Listen, I wasn't. Listen, my history degree was very little about memorizing dates.
Also,
I wrote my dissertation on the Vietnam War, and I still can't tell you the main dates of it.
Also, yeah, your 2 areas are of study were pop culture in the Vietnam War and ancient Rome.
Yeah. Many similarities, believe it or not, but that's a stream for another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this whole thing, for me, what I found dark, and it's only dark in hindsight, is the fact that all this was triggered because one man needed to get off.
Yeah.
Because one man's ego couldn't take the fact that he was getting older, couldn't get it up the way he used to, couldn't keep it up the way he used to, and he was getting a little bit
funny in the head.
Funny in the head.
Basically, the blow to his masculine ego paired with Red Scare indoctrination and propaganda to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need you to do an impression and tell us how what is it? He has the best bodily fluids. That's kind of where my brain went.
The women, they sense my power, but I deny them my essence.
Yeah. Basically, you're using the pull-out method, mate. That's only 30% effective. Use a condom.
Yeah.
Seriously. If that guy whose impression you just did ever sees this, use a fucking condom. You are not allowed to breed.
He already did.
Yeah, you're not allowed to breed anymore. You've already done enough damage. Speaking of not being allowed to breed, Doctor Strange's eugenics plan.
Yeah.
I think what I found really funny about this, in a really dark way, is how quickly these guys who supposedly meant well and were trying to protect the world and, were in the war room trying to keep everyone alive and protect America and all this, how quickly they got on board with it.
Yeah.
And can I point out that promising 10 busty blondes for every man is not all that far away from promising 42 virgins.
Yeah. Though I will say...
Oh, is it 72?
72.
Is it 72? I feel like 72 is a lot.
Well, think about it this way. It's 72 rounds of bad, mediocre, like bad, inexperienced sex.
Yeah, that's what I mean by it sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's not that far on, and that's why this film's really weird about the way it presents the Americans. One minute you've got the president who's very Independence Day. This is a hand on his chest and flag waving behind him and all that.
Yeah.
He's like Hacker in Yes Minister. He's like, doing his Churchill impression. And then you see how quickly these guys turn on the promise of sex.
Though, to be fair, this is also after realizing that one plane is still getting through.
Mm. Yeah, and it's one of those, what would you do if you knew it was going to end?
Yeah.
And it's an immediate reshuffling of priorities.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a really important message of this film of you can't allow desperation and terror to reshuffle your core morals and ethics, which is what they do.
Yeah.
And because they allow that reshuffling, maybe they're not trying as hard to bring that plane down.
Yeah.
Maybe there were other alternatives that they hadn't explored.
Yeah.
Maybe if there were other alternatives in place and this doomsday machine wasn't there and there were alternatives to come back from it, maybe they wouldn't have listened to the whack job in the wheelchair so closely.
Yeah, whose Nazi hand was trying to strangle him.
Yeah. And it's all very... It is very American.
Yeah.
In the way they approach this. They're very gung-ho. And I think the most interesting point for me is the fact that the president is the least stereotypically American in the place.
Yeah.
Because we see it in... When you get the British captain and the general in the radio room.
Yeah.
Well, in the office just before he locks the door.
Yeah.
The difference in the approach. I've spent my entire life stuck with Russia on one side and America on the other.
Yeah.
I don't remember the Cold War. I'm not old enough.
Yeah.
I remember other things, but I'm not old enough to remember the Cold War. I cannot imagine how terrifying that was to live through. I talked to my dad about it, people who were around at the time. And you find these people are very... They are the ones who are most likely to say, hang on, what about the collateral?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that has slowly seeped into sort of the British consciousness of we're always thinking, unless we're the ones doing the firing, obviously, because our government are just fuckwits.
Yeah.
But when it's America and Russia, there's always Britain sort of in the middle going, hey,
yeah,
please stop, you're going to kill us all,
Yeah.
And that's kind of how Britain likes to see itself, whether it is or not, and whether it's not just following America on a leash. Is a... let's not start talking about 2001, 2003.
Yeah.
It is a different kettle of fish. But...
Yeah.
The difference in approach... This guy has decided, because he's got an issue with his bodily fluids,
Yeah.
that the answer is to go to war.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a standard joke of British man has a health problem, what does he do? He goes to the doctor. American has a house problem, what does he do? He goes to war.
Yeah.
And it shows that really different mentality really well. Now, obviously the British captain is a stereotype. No one talks like that in Britain.
Yeah.
Like, not even our toughs talk like that. I don't know where that accent comes from. I've never known anyone in real life who actually talks like that outside of news broadcasts from, like, the 1950s. It's the old, that's received pronunciation accent. No one talks like that. That's the Queen's English, and famously not even the Queen speaks the Queen's English.
Yeah.
And it's just... He's quite clearly a walking trope. He's meant to be.
Yeah.
I do like, one of the things I really liked, because it's filmed in black and white, the uniforms are really hard to differentiate.
Yeah.
And you sort of get the impression that if there were Russian soldiers there, you wouldn't be able to tell who was who.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting aside that my brain went down.
Though there is a really interesting. It's one of the few outdoor scenes.
Yeah.
Where you have the two soldiers watching the jeeps come towards the base.
And he says, those look really good. Those could be genuine.
Yeah.
And where did he probably got them from? Army surplus.
Yeah.
And it kind of proves the point that in a situation like that, where the orders that have been given are so wrong, the uniform becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
And there is a really deep philosophical discussion about at what point does it become not only the right thing to do, but the legal and the proper thing to do to disobey a direct order.
Yeah.
In the military. And that as well, looking on it in hindsight, let's say the last 10 years,
yeah,
there have been examples of that where there's definitely a debate to be had.
Yeah.
And I don't mean a debate regarding the pronouns of the people involved. Those are not up for the debate. Those have been stated. Respect them, damn it.
Yeah.
You know, and
yeah.
I think what I find really interesting about this film, I don't know about you, everything I've said about this film so far, I've made a crack about something that's happened in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Because it's still relevant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And if anything, it's even more relevant than it was.
some things are too relevant.
Yeah.
Like have become so relevant that they're no longer funny.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of satire. Now, I'm a bit academic for a second. Yeah. Satire is not meant, at its core, the origin of satire is not meant to be funny.
Yeah.
Satire is pointing out the difference between what is and what should be. You know, satire is pointing out why, you know, where shit's going wrong, basically.
Yeah.
In such a way that it's very difficult to know whether it's genuine or not. That's why you know, the famous satirist Swift, who's the guy who did Absalom and Achitophel? My brain's gone. All these sort of 17th century satirists, the original satirists, this film is more in the vein of the 17th century satirists, the 17th and 18th century satirists, who were talking about things like the French Revolution and the Dreyfus Affair and things like that.
Yeah.
That it is modern satire, which is things like, Yes Minister, which is things like, Saturday Night Live,
Yeah.
which, that kind of thing. That's satire as well, but it's a different kind of satire. That's played for laughs. This is...
So
don't get me wrong, it is funny, but
yeah,
it's more... The laugh is not the most important part of this film. The
yeah,
fact that it's funny is almost irrelevant. It's a side benefit
yeah.
for me.
So you would say that that Doctor Strangelove is Kubrick saying, "I have a modest proposal."
Yeah. It's a modest proposal. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's who I was thinking of. That's where I was going with that. Thank you
Yeah.
for finishing my thought for me. And it's almost... It almost sets itself up like a horror film as well.
Yeah.
Because what are the first three things that happen in any horror film? The main characters are cut off from all contact with the outside world.
Yep.
The ability to leave is impeded in some way.
Yep.
200-yard perimeter, anyone who gets near should be shot.
And that's the case for all three sets of casts. You know, those in the war room, those in the plane,
yeah,
and those in and Mandrake and Ripper.
Yeah. And I think this film is really... It's... The psychological warfare that this film puts you through.
Yeah.
Because it does. It's psychological warfare, is this film.
Yeah.
It really makes you question a lot of things.
Well, yeah, the only open, like, 90% of the film takes place indoors, and the only open set is the war room.
Yeah. And it's really claustrophobic. And, all ability to communicate outwardly is scuppered. And it does feel like the first half an hour of a war film. Of a horror film.
Yeah.
The only thing that's missing, and even to the point, if you characterize this doomsday machine and this Plan R, we always hear what Plan R is, and yet for the first 40 minutes of the film, no one bothers to explain what Plan R is.
Yeah.
And it is the monster under the bed. It is the monster. Plan R is the monster. Which is... interesting. This film as a horror film is definitely an argument for it.
Yeah,
I say without really thinking it through, but
yeah. So
like
basically, what you're saying is the monster is the nuclear war we found along the way.
Yeah, the monster is the fact that you created a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
The nuclear weapon is not the monster. It's the same message as Frankenstein, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
The monster is not the creature. The monster is the creator.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about the doomsday machine. We were going to tell people about it on Monday.
Yeah. You know how the premiere likes his surprises.
Yeah. The thing is, though, right? The way the Cold War worked, if that situation ever occurred, where the Russians had something that they were waiting to announce until a party conference, the only people who wouldn't know about it would be the Russians at that conference.
Yeah.
The Americans would know, the British would know, the whole world, it would be an open secret in the intelligence communities.
But what pushed our decision was learning that you were working on one yourselves.
Yeah.
Our source was the New York Times.
Yeah. And this is the thing, that's a really clever joke about the Cold War. So during the Cold War, the American government, when they wanted to unofficially say something or do something that they couldn't officially come out and say outright, there would be a leak to the New York Times. Happens in Britain as well, famously is it the Telegraph is the mouthpiece of MI5 or one of them? Famously, when the intelligence community want to say something but they can't come out right and say it, they leak it to a newspaper. Same with the politicians. There's that famous Yes Minister sketch where, there'll be a leak.
Yeah.
It's very rare that there is a leak in government or in intelligence that was not intended or ordered by someone.
Yeah.
Because when there is a leak and it wasn't intended, what happens is that person gets accused of all kinds of heinous crimes, has to move halfway across the world to run away from being caught in the middle of the street and taken back to face the death penalty for something that they probably didn't do on charges of espionage.
Well, or...
Again, relevant.
Yeah, or, a president ends up resigning before he can be kicked out of office, and we get our first president who wasn't ever elected for any kind of executive position.
Yeah. Unintended leaks have consequences.
Yeah.
So if no one ever loses their job because of a leak, you can assume it was meant to be leaked.
Yeah.
That was the point. What was I saying? Was I talking about? Oh, yeah, I was talking about the fact that they would have known about this doomsday machine.
Yeah.
What I love, though, about all of this, and we see it happen repeatedly throughout the film. They talk about how they were losing the arms race, the space race, and the peace race.
Yeah.
And how people were grumbling.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, when the planes go in and everything else, there's a comment passed of, they'll beat us in the mineshaft race. There'll be a mineshaft gap.
No, so during that speech, the ambassador says, and we were, after they learned about the American doomsday machine that was being, put into the works, they were afraid of a doomsday gap.
Yeah. And there's always this fear of the gap.
Yeah.
And you know how I pointed out about how satire is meant to prod at the space between the ideal and the reality?
Yeah.
There's a reality gap.
Yeah.
And this film is prodding at it.
Yeah.
And that repetition, and there's so many things that are called gaps in this film. You have the what was the I will say as well, because I'll get onto it, but all these things, these different gaps, the space gap, the arms gap, the peace gap, all of these different things.
Yeah.
For me, that's what they're doing. They're directing the audience to look at what gap this film is trying to prod at.
Yeah.
But I need you to explain something to me.
Yeah.
Please. In 2 films, I have heard an American say in a very distinctive accent, "There's an international communist conspiracy." These 2 films are nothing alike.
Yeah.
These 2 films are, of course, Dr. Strangelove and the Blues Brothers. The fuck is the international communist conspiracy?
Wait, who? Oh, what? Oh, was it like the Illinois Nazis that were saying?
Yes, the Nazi on the bridge says the international communist conspiracy in action. Or the international Jewish communist conspiracy in action or something, he says. And then you get it here. The international communist conspiracy, this general cites as the reason that he wants to go to nuclear war.
Yeah, to of indoctrination and to contaminate our precious bodily fluids.
Yeah. And I think it's really telling. The reason I point that out, those two films put those words in the mouth of the enemy.
Yeah.
Now, 1964, McCarthyism is what, the early 50s? 53 onwards? What?
Yeah.
Stalin died in 53, I think.
Though I'll say McCarthyism never really ended.
No, it never really ended, but hit its peak in sort of the mid-50s.
Yeah.
So this is about a decade after McCarthyism has really hit its peak.
Yeah.
And, we're talking about an idea that was so pervasive that, people lost presidential races and things because they were accused of being a communist.
Yeah.
And, it's still... I think the law is still on the books in America that you can't be... That being a communist is illegal, but don't quote me.
Yeah.
I know there was a law from, 1918 banning communism in America.
And, heck, look at Bernie.
Exactly. And he was only called a socialist, not communist.
Yeah.
So,
to the American right, there's no difference.
The American right needs to read a book. Not that one. Or that one. And it doesn't matter what two books you're thinking of, they need more books than those two.
Yeah.
But yeah. I get the whole McCarthyism, anti-communism in America thing.
Yeah.
But the idea of an organised international communist conspiracy.
Yeah.
I would like to point out to any Americans who believe that you're attributing the ability to organise and execute a full-on conspiracy to a country that was so disorganised that when its leader went to a tractor factory to see how the damn things were made, they had to be pushed for the pictures because they didn't have an engine to put in the machine. Okay. The USSR was never organised enough for that kind of a conspiracy.
Yeah.
It's the great weakness of socialism and communism, folks. When there's no leader, it all goes to hell. Because people argue. If you've ever tried to organise a night out without someone taking control and saying, no, we're doing it on this time, and we're going here to eat, and then we're going there, you know that you never go anywhere because everyone's arguing. It's a microcosm. That's one of those things that really irritates me. And the reason I bring that up is because of what I'm about to bring up next. The conversation between this General Ripper and the British captain right before Ripper walks into the bathroom.
Yeah.
Do you want to put a trigger warning?
Yeah, hold on.
A, because of what Ripper does.
Yeah.
Which I will say in a minute once the trigger warning goes up. But B, because of the conversation that occurs before then. Okay, so the conversation is basically Ripper realises he's about to be captured. He thinks he's going to be tortured for the code, so he walks into the bathroom and blows his own brains out. To put it really bluntly.
Yeah.
But before he does that, he has this conversation with the British captain, and again, there's a commentary there on how people who've not actually been at the front of a war are very willing to go there when others aren't. You have this American general who's started a nuclear war and thinks, he's going to take on the Russians single-handedly and he's going to win the world for America. He's scared of being captured in case he's tortured because he doesn't think he'll be able to stand up to torture. And you have him turn to the British officer who says, actually, yes, I was a prisoner of war, and yes, I was tortured, and I think it was just because they were having some fun. They didn't actually want any information out of me.
Yeah.
And he's the one who, throughout this, has been trying to put a stop to it all.
Yeah.
You're the veteran. Go on this. You go on this. You can probably put this better than I can. When you say it'll, you know.
Yeah. Brain is.
Your brain has got a giant asshole in the front of it.
Yeah.
That's what's going on there.
And well, yeah, and like you learn, yeah, it's like first, yeah, so yeah, you learn that, you know, well, you learn pretty early on that, you know, Group Captain Mandrake had probably seen action, you know, because, you know, the string's out in his leg. And he'd only, like, his only experience with a machine gun was pushing a button in his Spitfire.
Yeah, but he has seen action.
Yeah.
So, and then and then there's this torture conversation they have.
Yeah.
Which makes you think he was probably shot down somewhere over Japan, captured and tortured.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into the historical. There's no point, but that's the backstory they've given him. What I'm interested in is the last thing he wants is a nuclear war.
Yeah.
The last thing he wants is those planes getting within radar distance of the Russians.
Yeah.
And his entire motivation throughout this film is make it stop.
Yeah, get the code so it can stop.
Yeah, at all costs. And we never see him raise a weapon in anger.
Yeah.
We never see him even get violent, really.
Yeah, the closest he gets is holding the belt for Ripper.
Yeah. And then we have Ripper, who claims he's seen action but wasn't a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
And doesn't think he can face torture.
Yeah.
Which makes me think maybe he wasn't quite as close to the front lines as he's making out.
Yeah.
Not because I think everyone on the front lines was captured and tortured. That's just... You can tell which characters in this film have actually seen action and which ones haven't.
Yeah.
And for me, the president's seen action. The Russian ambassador's probably seen something somewhere. And the British captain has.
Yeah.
Those three guys, because those are the three guys who are trying to stop this.
Arguably, Strangelove might have.
There is an argument for that, given his physical condition and symptoms.
Yeah.
But also, yeah. Also, that is a historical fact, folks. America did grant asylum to some ex-Nazis to go and work on the Manhattan Project. It was a thing. Also, that's what the next Indiana Jones movie is going to be about, apparently.
Ah.
So, apparently, they're dealing with a guy who helped invent the bomb.
Ooh.
He's playing the Nazi in the next one. Because we're due an Indiana Jones Nazi film, and the Nazi is something to do with the bomb.
Nice.
So yeah, that's a thing. And of course, the Nazi is Mads Mikkelsen, so I will be watching that. Deal with it.
And I mean, it is an odd-numbered Indiana Jones film, and so assuming the relic they're going after is Judeo-Christian, it should be a good one.
Yeah. I don't know what relic they're going after, though. It might be something to do with the bomb.
Yeah.
It depends what the plot is. I don't know.
Yeah. That's been pretty close to the chest from what I can see.
Yeah. But again, you know how I was talking about the when you stop trying and you give up.
Yeah.
What this general did, where he decided he couldn't face torture, so he went and blew his own brains out,
Yeah.
is kind of foreshadowing what the Americans do once they realise the plane's not going to be stopped.
Yeah. Which, which is like probably the one part of the movie where you absolutely have to be watching the screen because it's one of the best sight gags of the movie. Where General Turgidsen's getting all fired up and talking about how his boys are hot shot pilots and they'll get right on through, and then he realizes what he's saying and the look on his face.
Yeah, is he realises, and that's a really interesting thing of shit. He's talking about how good his guys are, and he's basically shot himself in the foot with how good they are.
Yeah.
And again, it's this question of the one time you would want even one of them to question that order once it was confirmed and to stop and think. They don't, because they're that good at their jobs because he's trained them that well.
Well, so I think we should give the rest of the stream to the airplane plotline because we haven't touched it at all.
No, we haven't. There is a reason for that.
Yeah, but before we do so, I'm going to say it's very interesting that what the last line of the movie is.
Remind me.
Dr. Strangelove stands up and says, "Mein Führer, I can walk."
Yes. I have my own theories as to what that's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
You go first.
Well, now, see, I know for a fact that wasn't intentional.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I know for a fact that it wasn't intentionally going to be the end of the movie. Because there was going to be another scene after it, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see in the in the war room, there's that big table full of desserts and pies and cream puffs and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, the movie was originally supposed to end with a giant pie fight.
Yeah, that would be very American.
But the thing is, they went through and they filmed it. But Kubrick forgot to tell the actors to play it straight. And so the characters were having, the actors were obviously having too much fun. And so they had to cut that scene.
Fair. Because there are a couple of scenes where there's one where he's standing up and he's bragging about his men in the aircraft, and the guy playing the Russian corpses.
Yeah.
You see him laugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, that final line for me, I think there's a message in this film of be careful you don't turn into your own idea of the devil.
Yeah.
And the whole message of this film to me is the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
If you want to watch it straight.
Yeah.
But that's the entire point. When you take this as a satire, what it's saying is that where good intentions lead and where we hope good intentions lead are two very different things. And we have to be careful. And that's the modest proposal, if you like.
Yeah.
Of this film. So I find it really... the whole point that the Russians and the Americans, the comments even passed in the film, the Russians, the great fighters, even after the Germans killed so many of them, they still kept coming.
Yeah.
They worked together to destroy Nazism and everything Nazism stood for.
Yeah.
And then through a series of unfortunate events, miscalculations, misplaced trust in the wrong people and the wrong institutions, and lack of foresight and fail-safes,
And
they became that which they had fought to destroy.
And also, not to mention fear-mongering propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. They became their own worst enemy.
Yeah.
And it's the great quote, isn't it? You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah, basically and honestly, I think it's a good thing that the pie fight had to be scrapped.
Yeah.
Because having it end with, Dr. Strangelove standing and saying, "Mein Führer, I can walk," and then just mushroom clouds is a much bigger punch.
Yeah, and it's much more impactful, and it really, that's the moment where all comedy is stripped from this film, and you're hit with that gap between the reality and the ideal of, oh shit, are we becoming that which we have personified as the devil in the 20th and 21st century? And that's a really relevant question, especially recently, of, there's so much propaganda out there, fake news, all the rest of it.
And
are we, vaccines. How many people have you heard say with COVID, oh, it's only the old and the sick who are going to die, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's eugenics, folks. That's the core of eugenics.
And ironically...
Are we becoming our own worst enemy?
And ironically, the mushroom clouds set to "We'll Meet Again" are the comedic relief to that punch right there.
Yeah. Obviously, "We'll Meet Again," a really famous Vera Lynn song, Second World War, soldiers, etc. But again, it's that bitter sweetness of that song. Speaking of that song, let's move on to the planes, because there's something I want to talk about in the planes.
Yeah.
I call it the aeroplane theme.
Yeah.
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 Because I grew up Catholic, my brain fills that track in with the words, "The animals marched in 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah. The animals marched in 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah."
And my brain filled it in with "The ants go marching 1 by 1.
Exactly. And it's a really interesting choice of music.
Though it's actually meant to be "Johnny, I Hardly Knew Ya."
Yeah. And it's a really interesting piece.
Yeah.
And it plays every time it cuts back to the point by the end of the film, it's played so much when you go to the plane that there's one shot where it goes back to the plane and it delays the start of the song by about 3 seconds. It's not by long. But you sat there going, where's the music?
Yeah.
Where's the song? And then it starts. Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, "Johnny, I Hardly Knew Ya"
is an anti-war song.
Yeah. An anti-war song played over a nuclear missile plane. A plane with nuclear missiles on it.
Well, technically they're bombs, not missiles.
All right. Do they both go bang?
Yes, but here's the difference. A bomb is a drop and then a bang. A missile is a prolonged bang propelling it and then a bigger bang.
That thing dropped out of the plane with him on it and went bang. It's a bomb.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Not a missile.
Okay. Yeah, I'm confused now. Whichever. I'm a civilian. Sue me. No,
Yeah.
don't sue me. I can't afford it.
Yeah.
So, I'm just going back now. We had, and it's really interesting that again, the only people who ever question the order when it goes through, other than the Brit with his radio,
Yeah.
are the guys on the plane. The pilot, in fact. He gets the code through, and he gets it through Foxtrot Golf Delta 135.
Yeah.
He checks his code book, and it's for Wing Attack Plan R.
And he's like, that can't be it.
That can't be right. Check it again. And he checks it again. And then he looks in and he says to the pilot, Wing Attack Plan R. And the pilot says, that's not right. Check it again. And he points the pilot to the dials and says, look. It's and then shows him the code book. Wing Attack Plan R. They can't believe what they've been told to do.
Yeah, and... Well, and, you know, Major Kong, you know, says, before, you know, they open up the envelopes, says, if this is half as important as I think it is, there's going to be a lot of promotions and accommodations.
And commendations.
Yeah.
Regardless of your race, colour, or creed.
Yeah.
Which, for a film made in 1964, is a very interesting thing to say.
Also, the first film to have the first film James Earl Jones appeared in.
Yeah. So, again, and the points there, and do you want to talk about the pilot's cowboy hat?
Yeah.
Is that you? Okay, can you do the Joker voice? Can you do the Joker from last week?
Are you talking about the impression of the Duke? Well, I suppose I can, Pilgrim.
Yeah. Or as it was put last week, is that you, John Wayne? Is this me?
Yeah.
It immediately makes him American. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
no other country on the planet wears Stetsons.
Yeah.
Just deal with it. I own one and I won't wear it in England because, I don't know, someone will probably stick a knife in me or something.
Well,
I don't want to take that risk.
As I said at the beginning of the stream, and I'll reiterate, when Peter Sellers broke his leg and couldn't thus play the role of Major Kong, Kubrick's like, okay, we have to find a real cowboy.
Yeah.
And actually, ironically, the Texan accent was the one that Peter Sellers was having trouble trying to pick up.
Valid. I will say as well, just to put this out there.
Yeah.
The pilot, I am learning the more American films I watch, when someone says, I'm not one for making big speeches, he's about to make you bawl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the pilot, regardless of how gung-ho he is, which he really is,
Yeah.
And how obsessed he is with following this order, he's very much 1940s Captain America, follow
Yeah.
your orders to the letter.
Well, the thing is, first he made sure that it was the right order.
Yeah. And then he...
Well, because he knows Wing Attack Plan R is something that should that should have only been triggered if the Russians had already done a sneak attack.
Yeah, I think I wrote down Wing Attack Plan R was a preemptive nuclear attack in the event... No, it was a retaliatory nuclear attack in the event of a sneak attack by the Russians which targeted major civilian populations.
Including
AKA
Washington, D.C.
Yeah, basically the president.
Yeah.
So he is working under the assumption that the Russians have either landed on American soil, have nuked Washington, D.C.,
yeah,
or someone's managed to put a bullet in the president. That's what he's working on the assumption of. One of those three things. And in those three situations, you can understand why he's fired up and ready to go. This is his country's last hurrah, and he's going to make sure that it goes down in style, basically.
Yeah.
And that his reaction to that, and I'm treading carefully about how I word this. Americans should have been shown this film in like August 2001, because then maybe they wouldn't have reacted by reaching for guns and weapons in September.
Yeah.
Because they'd have thought to question it and to look around themselves a little bit.
Though, I will say something. And I'm not 100% sure about that, considering the fact that it took us only a couple months to Leroy Jenkins into Iraq and Afghanistan, but January 6th, happened months ago, and nearly a year ago, and we're still trying to get even congressional hearings about it.
But that's because the people who attacked DC in January were Americans.
Yeah.
America is not good at dealing with its own internal issues. Give you an outside enemy to fight and you club together, and the best way of unifying a country is to give it a foreign enemy. Yeah. America is a living embodiment of that. Shit at dealing with its own issues. Always has been.
Yeah.
Way too divided, and the way the legislature and the judiciary have been set up, you're not going to get anything like an actual decent outcome there when something happens internally, because the whole thing is designed basically to cripple itself if it tries to actually do anything of use in a situation like that.
Yeah.
And it's deliberately designed that way, I might add.
Yeah.
The whole point is checks and balances.
Yeah.
But in a situation like January 6th, you can't have checks and balances, because the checks and balances are what the enemy, who is part of that same system, is going to use to stop anything being done.
Okay. Or to bring this back to the movie.
In America's defense, as Raina's just put in the chat, yes, to be fair, a lot of countries have that issue. But America was actually legitimately and deliberately designed that way.
The checks and balances for Wing Attack Plan R were something that General Ripper exploited to try and force America to fully commit to a nuclear holocaust of Russia.
Yeah. So we've got shuts down the radios on the base, because if
Yeah.
there had been a major nuclear attack or a major international attack, civilian radio would not be playing like that.
Yeah.
There would be emergency messaging on the radios across all stations, all bandwidths.
That is assuming there's any radio at all.
Yeah, assuming the radio towers haven't gone down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the fact that you can get radio and the fact that it's just playing the same old, it's playing happy dance music, tells you nothing's wrong. When radio goes out across all stations, declarations of emergency still go out. There are still dedicated bands of radio waves set aside for things like that, and there are still buttons in headquarters of MI5, MI6, the police, where someone can press a button and a pre-recorded message goes out. The BBC have got a button, apparently, that there's an alarm that's going to go off when the Queen dies. The problem is, no one knows what the hell it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it going to be woo, woo, woo? No one knows. Apparently, it goes off once a month or so when the batteries run out. So that's reassuring. Like a smoke alarm. Yeah. That's reassuring.
Gerald Ford was eaten by wolves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, and who's going to press the button in that situation? But even if that button doesn't get pressed to send out the emergency signal, the radio's still going to stop if everyone's bloody incinerated by nuclear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either someone will be there to press the button or the radio will stop, one or the other.
Yeah.
Neither of those things had happened. So that's your first check and balance that he neatly bypasses by basically what sounds like an early version of OPSEC, where he's basically saying no communication in or out.
Yeah.
And then you've got the entire point of Plan R, we should say at this point, is that in the untimely event of the death of the president, a less senior official is able to declare nuclear war.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of and the fact is everyone seems to know what Plan R is anyway.
Yeah.
Do you notice? Even before they opened the file or before it said, everyone knows what Plan R is. No one has to be told what it is. They all know it's serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, the message... Mark is right. The message for when the Queen dies, the code phrase is London Bridge has fallen.
Yeah.
Rain is right there, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's different codes for each member of the royal family.
But
yeah, that was off topic. Back to the plane. The actual radio system they use is really interesting.
Yeah.
They use CRMD.
Yeah.
Now, I think, but don't quote me, until very recently, that set of wavelengths was still in use for mobile phone usage in the US. I think it's only recently been turned off.
Wow.
It was 2G.
Yeah.
CMD something. CRMD. I'm sure it is. So they're basically using early phone signals, which makes sense. Early mobile signals. Makes sense. That's what you'd use.
Yeah.
And we've got the code prefix going on. Now, where am I looking? And then we have this thing where even the radio on the plane is designed to self-destruct if the wrong code is sent to it.
Well, it's it's designed to not let any messages through unless it's, you know,
Yeah.
preempted by the first,
Unless it's got the correct prefix
yeah,
of letters. Now, 3 letters, any 3 letters in any random order, they are right. There is something like 17,000 different combinations, possible combinations. And like they said, even with computers, that's 2.5 days of inputting these things, and you've got 11 minutes.
Yeah.
You need something quicker than that. And then the plane starts malfunctioning.
Yeah, because
they try to shoot it down, and then it starts malfunctioning.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah, the airburst of the missile triggered the self-destruct of the radio.
Yep, Mark's given us the exact number there of how many combinations of letters there are.
Yeah.
3 letter combinations there are.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting though is when they're going to fire nearer towards the end of the film.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about? Even as they're trying to fire, it's all very protocol driven.
Yeah.
First check, first switch, this check, that switch, the other switch.
Yeah.
And it's really... Do I want to say interesting? It's so protocol driven that none of them question any step in it until something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And again, it's this whole... Listen, America, at some point you have to accept that you're going to get bruised and battered on the world stage. It happens.
Yeah.
Empires don't last forever. Okay? But you can't go around destroying the world every time someone hits you with a baseball bat. Okay? You can't just decide that you're taking your bat and ball home because someone beat you on the round, on the baseball field. You can't do that.
And remember, if your empire lasts more than a couple of centuries, you should probably see a doctor.
I thought it was 4. Especially if you start to worry about your bodily fluids at any point during your empire.
Yeah.
I will point out that it was only when the general said to the British captain, I don't let the women have my essence.
Yeah.
And I can see here, I've literally written the word ejaculate ?
Yeah.
That's when it occurred to me what he was talking about.
Yeah.
So we have this pilot who I think takes the... I think this guy takes the award for best unintentional villain.
Yeah.
He's doing everything right.
Yeah.
He's following orders. He's looking after his guys. He's looking after his plane as best he can. He's doing everything right that he's supposed to do. He's confirming orders. He's double checking, triple checking, following protocols when he needs to. Going off piste when he needs to because shit's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Keeping his guys alive. And yet, he's the bad guy.
Yeah. Well, and here's another interesting fact is Slim Pickens and the rest of the actors on the plane, well, Slim Pickens in particular, had no idea he was in a comedy.
So he was playing it straight.
Yeah, he only saw the script for the scenes he was in, and he was told to play it straight.
See, I can almost believe that. And then I think about the scenes where he yells yeehaw on the bomb, and I'm just like, there's no fucking way you didn't know, dude.
Yeah.
Because no one does that in real life. I don't care. I don't care how American you are. If you do that in real life, you need to see a doctor.
Yeah.
And he is... Again, it's that... And it's harking back with the black and white screening, the cowboy hat. It's all harking back to American exceptionalism, American concepts of westward expansion and ruggedness, and the American man and American masculinity. And I don't mean toxic masculinity. I mean like the cowboy and that kind of masculinity.
Yeah. Though I mean,
that is also toxic, but in a different way.
Well, I mean, writing, waving a Stetson and riding a nuke down like it was a bucking bronco. It is basically the most apt metaphor for America you can get.
Yeah.
Mark Caesar screwing with the...
Mark Caesar screwing with me right now.
Yeah.
Let me put my glasses on before I misread that as like hundreds instead of thousands. But it is a really apt metaphor, followed by the final victory for Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
And I use those words very carefully because there's another phrase and expression that should immediately pop to your mind when I say the words final victory and the kind of person Dr. Strangelove was, and I don't want to say it too often in case you get like YouTube nuked. That should occur, and the idea for me, there's a way of watching this film very straight and taking it as, oh, it was all a Nazi plot and the Nazis won anyway.
Yeah.
I used the word twice after saying I don't want to use it in case you get nuked.
Well, I mean, there
would be a very right-wing way of reading this film. But then, when you really look at this film, the truth is, maybe it's asking us what makes us any different.
Yeah.
It gets really deeply philosophical when you get into those conversations.
Yeah, so, because, in the last moments on Earth, what are they doing in the war room? They're scrabbling about over mine shaft space.
Yeah. They need to sort out their priorities.
Yeah. Thinking about how they need to outbreed the communists so they can take over the world when or the post nuclear wasteland that the world would be.
Yeah. And they're going to do that by selecting women for their sexual appeal and selecting people to survive based on their intelligence, physical description, and skill sets.
While of course leaving the upper echelons of military and civilian leadership to continue the tradition.
Yeah, I would, for me, and I say this as someone who having studied the classics, that screamed Plato's Republic to me. Did that concept. The concept of an insular city, if you like, city-state, in which people are born And there are people at the top in control, and there are people who are skilled, and then there are labourers, and you don't really move between them, and you're encouraged to breed, but not to form emotional attachments to your family or your children, and you know, read The Republic. Don't read it before bed. It's a downer, but read it. It's that's what it sounds like. That is really what it sounds like. And I feel like anyone who wants a world like that missed the entire point of The Republic. Just putting that out there.
So, there is one scene that we should talk about that we haven't really yet.
Go on.
If you don't get a hold of the president, you know what's going to happen, right? You're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
Yeah. Do you know about the Coca-Cola wars?
No, enlighten me.
Right, so the Coca-Cola wars were a thing. Now, I need to check the dates on this, because I don't know if it's a reference to them or not.
Now, I know about the Pepsi fleet.
Yeah, no, the Cola wars and I'm reading from Wikipedia, refers to the long-time rivalry between soft drinks producers, the Coca-Cola Company and PepsiCo, who engaged in mutually targeted marketing campaigns for the direct competition between each company's product lines, especially their flagship colas, Coca-Cola and Pepsi. This began in the late 70s and into the 1980s, which gave this cultural... the competition escalated, giving this cultural phenomena its current moniker, the Cola Wars. Now, that came after this, but it almost foreshadows it in a weird way.
Yeah.
The idea that even though literally the world is at stake, it is such an American thing to give a flying fuck about private property in that moment.
Yeah.
It's so American.
Well,
just
and you know,
again,
that
another thing that is grossly relevant to modernity. When people are fighting for their lives and their rights, private property is the least of their concerns.
Yeah. Well, also that line, that line speaks volumes about, corporate meddling in government affairs.
Yeah. And don't forget now, corporations are people, so they can sue you.
Yeah.
Which, again, interesting foreshadowing from this film.
Yeah.
I do love how he shot the machine and then the coke spat out at him.
Yeah.
You could almost say that the machine's bodily fluids covered him.
Yeah.
You could almost say that in the way that it's viewed.
So you're saying that
the way he's kneeling down and the machine erupts over his face. You could almost say that.
So you're saying the machine didn't deny him its essence?
No, it didn't. The machine gave him what's known colloquially as a facial. Which I just thought was really interesting posing. The idea the idea of an American soldier, let's put it bluntly now, giving the Cola Corporation a blowjob.
Yeah.
That sums up corporate America, doesn't it?
Yeah. After going on about how Mandrake is some kind of prevert.
Prevert, yeah, prevert.
Yeah.
You can tell a lot of things that were said in this film were mangled for comedic effect, but they were only mangled so they'd get past the censors.
Yeah.
Prevert, pure grain alcohol.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can't say the word whiskey in a film about war. How dare you?
Yeah.
And it's for me, that is a joke about how America is basically on its knees giving the corporations a blowjob and has been since at least the 50s.
Yeah.
And take that however you like, but if you don't get out of the way, you get a face full. So decide what your kink is and stick with it, basically. So that was just an interesting point. Also, what is it about American films and blowing up phone boxes?
Yeah.
And damaging phone boxes and shit.
Well,
Just in general.
In this one, it served a narrative purpose.
Yeah, in this one, it's the narrative purpose. I do like the idea that he could save the world if only he had the right change.
Yeah.
Again, a scathing commentary on capitalism there.
Yeah.
And the soldier's remark of, I don't carry loose change in my uniform.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on that?
So, yeah, you're like, yeah. So even though it's like you're not really supposed, like, even though you have all the pockets in the world, you're not really supposed to carry anything in them.
Typical.
Or at least you're not supposed to carry anything in them if the uniform's being inspected.
Yeah, I feel like when we're 10 minutes from nuclear Armageddon, uniform inspections are not the priority.
Yeah. Maybe the U.S. just really hates the Doctor and wants to make sure they take out the TARDIS.
Okay, but that doesn't explain trying to blow up Elwood Blues.
Well, to be fair, it was Carrie Fisher and she was trying to get Jake Blues.
Is there a Star Wars Doctor Who battle we should be aware of? But yeah, the thing with that is as well, it's the one line of communication, and again, we see that there's always two ways films show the chain of command.
Yeah.
Either shit rolls downhill, or I call it sort of the rush job promotions.
Yeah.
Which you see. And we saw we saw both actually in Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
We saw the whole shit runs downhill rank-wise.
Yeah.
And we saw the battlefield promotions. And that's essentially what we've got here with this British captain, is the battlefield promotion.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that the soldier, and I think it says it's a commentary on how people really can't grasp these apocalyptic moments.
Yeah.
That the soldier can't grasp the importance of the situation and is more interested in telling him how he's going to answer to Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Or, something petty. Basically.
Or,
like,
or how he's not gonna, how he's gonna make sure that he doesn't do any kind of pre-versions.
Yeah. It's like, what do you think the guy's going to do in a glass box with a phone?
Yeah.
Like, what perversions do you really think he can get up to?
Being a limey in America.
Grr. Actually, yeah, I'll allow you calling that guy a limey because he is a stereotypical limey.
Yeah.
Rain, we watched. We're talking about Doctor Strangelove,
Yeah.
We're all in a weird, silly
Yeah.
mood.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well.
and I think the weird thing is everyone except the people in the war room who you would expect to stick to protocols and have plans and contingencies in place
Yeah.
sticks to protocols and contingencies throughout this film.
Yeah.
Which is it's what's the line? What we have here is a failure to
Failure to
communicate.
communicate, which we should really cover sometime.
We should at some point, yes.
But
Um,
what? But that's the thing, is the protocols were what created this situation.
yeah. And what is making the situation worse or unfixable is the lack of communication.
Yeah.
And it's. I can see why, if they watched this film in the 60s, people might have been frightened that something like that could happen and why the disclaimer was necessary.
Yeah.
Because in a world where the only phone you've got is a landline and your radio lives in your pocket, but you've had to turn it in and you've got no other way of communicating. I mean,
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Send up smoke signals?
Yeah.
You know, what are your options? And that's why I think it's really telling. Like, in this day and age, if someone said to me, you know, the internet's gone down, or one of the social media's gone down, which seems to happen once every two or 3 months at least.
Yeah.
What's the first thing I do when one social media goes down? I hop onto another one.
Yeah.
You know, Twitter goes down, I go check Facebook. Facebook goes down, I go to Discord. Discord goes down, I go to Instagram. Instagram goes down, I go to WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Facebook owns so many of those. Facebook goes down, we're all just fucked, and we go to Discord, and we just, we live in silence for 3 hours thinking everyone's dead and worrying about the people we were talking to.
Yeah.
That's how that goes down. And it is really that moment of, in the modern day, we don't assume that we will ever be in a situation where we're out of communication.
Yeah.
Like, the idea of having no phone signal sends a shiver of dread down my spine. What if I miss that important phone call? What if? I haven't had an important phone call in 7 years.
Yeah.
But what if I miss it if my phone signal drops?
Yeah.
You know, because everything always happens when you're unreachable.
Yep.
And this film really plays on that fear of being unreachable, being essentially alone.
Yeah. And which kind of reads into the, like, you can very much like read this as a horror movie.
It is very much a horror movie. Like, yeah, it's a dark comedy. Most dark comedies are at their core a horror film.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, the difference between Dr. Strangelove and a horror, and what would traditionally be called a horror movie, is, in a traditional horror movie, the tension is released by a scare. In Dr. Strangelove, the tension is released by a joke.
Except the joke is so dark, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's a dark comedy, and it really, I don't know if anyone's ever made this comparison before. It reminds me very much of sort of the dogme Danish cinema dark comedies. It's played straight throughout the film.
Yeah.
And it's not ha-ha funny. It's nervous tittering and... Did I just hear what I thought I heard? Did they just... Was that... and it's playing with what's the word I'm looking for? When things are just completely weird and
The
it's playing in
uncanny.
the liminal. Yeah, it's playing in the liminal space of the uncanny valley.
Yeah.
It's just close enough to real life that you can believe it would happen, but it's also like it's that feeling of you couldn't make this story up. This is so ridiculous.
Oh well, here's the thing. It's so close to to what could be real that apparently every now I did read this as an internet fact, so I may be like 100% wrong about this, but apparently every president after Doctor Strangelove has been surprised to find out that there actually is not a war room under the Pentagon.
No, but there is a bunker for there
Yeah.
is an escape bunker,
Yeah.
which is basically the war room.
But yeah, a war room with a big board.
Yeah. You can't let the Russian ambassador in here, he'll see the big board.
Yeah.
That is entirely the point.
Yeah.
That was an interesting moment that we've not touched on.
Oh yeah, because basically because President Muffley's point is trying to avoid the end of the world.
Yeah.
And
okay, so no, go on. Finish your story.
And like up until they find out about the Doomsday device, the conflict in the war room is between President Muffley and General Turgidson, because General Turgidson is all for playing into Ripper's plan, while Muffley doesn't want to be remembered as someone who committed a nuclear genocide against Russia.
Yeah. Okay. Philosophical, moral, ethical quandary for you.
Yeah.
You're in the war room. It's happening.
Yeah.
It's happening. There has been a sneak attack by Russia. Or you think there has been a sneak attack by Russia. Or any, whoever you want to name. Russia, Germany, pick your country, basically. Doesn't really matter. There's been a sneak attack. Radios are down. What call are you making? Because that's what this film really gets at of which side are you on in the war room?
Yeah.
Are you calling the bluff? Are you... And again, poker analogies. Kubrick had a point. Are you calling the bluff? Are you folding? Where are you at?
Though there is a very interesting thing there between the three narratives of the film. See, in the plane, they had, after the first, or after the go order, after the inciting incident, they have all the ability to take action, but no information. And in the war room, they have all the information they need, but no real ability to take action.
Yeah. And it's one of those things like, okay, you're on that plane. You're the co-pilot, the navigation man, whoever you are. This order comes through. Nuke them. Kill them all. That's the only information you've got.
Yeah.
Do you believe in your heart of hearts you'd follow that order? Or would you be like the person who Rain has already mentioned in the chat, who when the order came down to a submarine station by Cuba to fire, refused?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because on that particular submarine, there were 3 people who had to unanimously agree to fire the nukes. And I think it was the captain that refused.
Mm. And that's a hell of a question to ask.
Yeah.
But that's what this film's asking you. If you were in the war room, what would you do? And is that different to what you'd do if you were on the plane?
Yeah.
If you're on the plane, you're working with very limited information. All you know is the orders come through and we've got to go.
Oh, okay. It was a guest that refused.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing.
There are civilians in the war room who don't want to fire, but there's no civilians on the plane. And that's exactly the point of what Rains just said there. It was a civilian who stopped them.
Yeah.
Well, a commander who wasn't supposed to be on the sub, someone who wasn't meant to be there.
Well, I mean that's the thing that also gives Dr. Strangelove a bit more edge on hindsight, because this was made, towards the middle of the beginning of the Cold War, or rather the beginning of the middle of the Cold War.
The Cold War hit fever pitch with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
And then saw about a decade or so of relative peace.
Yeah.
Because basically the Americans and the Russians had gone, holy shit, we just nearly killed everyone, we better back the fuck down.
Yeah.
And they started focusing on the space race instead, in which they couldn't actually, murderize the planet.
Yeah.
And they went down other avenues, because someone looked at this and went, oh shit, we just nearly killed everyone because we didn't have a fucking phone line. And that's why they introduced the red phone and, the other things.
And we learned, and in the ensuing decades, we learned all the myriads of times where the stupidest shit almost led to nuclear apocalypse. Like there was one where it was a flock of birds that looked like an attack on radar.
99 red balloons. There's a song about it.
Yeah.
Kids let off balloons in a peace protest. They let off balloons.
Yeah.
And it was caught on radar, and it looked like an incoming attack.
Yeah.
Yes, Khrushchev ordered the withdrawal of missiles after the Cuban Missile Crisis. But what we're talking about is other situations as well that could potentially be going on. And the fact that this commander in a sub... I know I've heard that story somewhere, whether it's true or not. The fact that it's even worth... The fact that we remember it and we believe it's possible is the entire point that we're making. That the stupidest shit can set these things off.
Yeah.
And it's... And when you look at it from that situation, and you think about the fact that there are a handful of people on the planet, most of us don't know who they are. They're not elected. They're sure as hell not public figures. But they hold all of our lives in their hands. How confident are you that none of them are going to go a little bit funny in their head and start wanting to start a war because of their precious bodily juices?
Yeah. And honestly, honestly, I'd hate to be one of the people whose job it is to to keep a watch on the button, because that would fuck over my brain, and it's already fucked over enough. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, there's a psychological theory where if you give someone a weapon, if you give someone a gun,
Yeah.
they get trigger happy. They get itchy to try it.
Yeah.
Like, that's why people, that's why you don't leave guns around people who don't know how to use them and respect them properly. And it's kind of... well, that...
Okay, to reiterate, on Wednesday I had a disagreement with a truck shelf. The truck shelf won.
Yeah. You fought the drawer and the drawer won? But yeah, the Guardian's a relatively reliable source. Rain, so yeah, if the Guardian's saying it's a true story, I'm happy to go for that one. I'm happy to accept that as a true story if the Guardian's put that out there, and that's a 10-year-old article, 9-year-old article. Someone would have refuted it by now.
Yeah.
So the idea that all these little things, like, it's the age-old question. Do you call out at the gates of the garden?
Yeah.
Do you tell the submarine commander, no, don't fire? Do you counterman an order that's been double confirmed?
Yeah.
At what point does your humanity kick in?
Yeah.
At what point, and again, this is that same question we asked of Full Metal Jacket last week, of at what point do you stop being a soldier, a commander? Do you stop following orders and just react like a human being?
Yeah. Yeah. Or the question is, at what point do you fall? So here's an interesting question that could actually span the 3 Kubrick works we've actually covered so far.
Go on.
At what? It's like, when do you let your commitment to orders destroy your I'll use humanity for a lack of a better term, because in 2001 it was Hal's prerogative to keep the real mission a secret that sent him that made him go nutso. In Full Metal Jacket, the question is, where how much of a human are you before you're a Marine?
Yeah.
And the whole tension, the whole conflict of Dr. Strangelove is, these orders have been given out, but they've been given out wrongly.
Yeah, and again, I hate to say it, but the Nazi character is right there.
Yeah.
There comes a point in a war in a situation where a defensive, but I was just following orders, does not fly.
Yeah.
Where is that point where we're talking about nuclear Armageddon here? We're talking about murdering. What did he say? 150 million versus 20 to 30 million?
Yeah. Though.
Or none at all.
That was. That was Turgison's estimate of U.S. casualties.
Yeah.
And Russian casualties would be about damn near as close to 100% as they could get.
Yeah. And it's one of those situations where, again, all countries do it, not just America.
Yeah.
But calculating the value of your own people's lives against the lives of other people.
Yeah.
It is something military people do that I can never quite. A life's a life. A life is a life is a life.
Yeah.
This film gets dark really quickly when they go down that track.
Yeah.
And it kind of. It's gross because the madman, the general, the whack job, the guy who's triggered all this shit, talks about Russians and dehumanizes them. They only drink vodka. They're not human like us. They don't drink water.
Yeah.
The international communist conspiracy.
Though I think they only drink vodka is him saying they know about the about the
fluoride.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at one point, vodka was probably better for you than the water, but
yeah.
But he's very. It's really interesting to me the fact that all of these characters dehumanize Russians as a general term, as communists, as the Ruskies, as where they've got a Russian in the room. But when they're talking to the ambassador, when they're talking over the phone to the Russian premier, they're all friendly and polite and human and decent and reasonable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only one who doesn't really demonize, the Soviets is the president, and he is the only civilian.
Yeah. And again, it's that one civilian in do you know what? This is why. This is the whole point. And the quote's given in the movie. This is why war is far too important to leave to the generals. You have to have a civilian voice in there. Do I think it should all be left up to politicians? No. But you have to have a civilian voice in there.
And that's why, especially, as how, because all the military characters that say anything about the Russians are of high enough rank that they've been geared to see the Russians as the enemy for years. Because they are all like the lowest ranked individual who mentions the Russians is Major Kong.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how it works in the Air Force, but to be a major, you've got to be in for at least, let's see, you've got
8 years to make officer.
Well,
2 years
that's
is...
assuming you don't go in as an officer.
Yeah.
But Major Kong does seem like the rose through the ranks type.
Yeah. What is it
So,
you call them? Mustangs? I don't know. I'm sure I've heard that term used in American military parlance
but
somewhere.
yeah, so 8 years to make officer, then, a couple years as a lieutenant, then a couple years as a second lieutenant, a couple years as a captain, and then, so yeah, Major Kong had in, been in for at least a couple decades. So he'd been in since at least World War II. So he's had a good, like, say, Dr. Strangelove is, shot as, what's the word? Contemporary to the time it was released. Major Kong would have been in since World War II, so he would have had in at least a couple decades of getting ready for the next big one against the Russians.
Yeah, Red Scare, McCarthyism, all of that. Also, my Cheshire Cat grin there is because I finally trained you to call them by the right pronunciation. If anyone caught that.
Yeah.
But yeah. This film, for me, it's a dark comedy. It questions what you would do. And it points... I find the best satires are a psychological thriller to some extent.
Yeah.
They really, really... They can freak you out. And they're supposed to. Because they're supposed to exist in that liminal space between your known reality, what you know reality is, and what might be, or what's possible.
Yeah.
Because they're pointing out how fine that line really is.
Yeah.
Or sometimes how wide that chasm is between the ideal and the reality.
We can't let there be a reality gap.
Exactly. And I think that's the point. We have a reality in which nuclear war, especially at this time, I mean, it was only after the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that would have been, Cuban Missile Crisis would have been 59, 60, something like that. Because Kennedy got popped off in 63, so it was only in his first term, and he wasn't all the way through it, so it would have been the early 60s. I know it's somewhere like that. Listen, like I said at the start of this, my history degree was not about memorizing dates.
So, I think 1960 was an election year. Because I'm pretty sure 1960 is divisible by 4.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
And so 1960 was an election year, which means...
No, wait, no, it wouldn't have been, because 30 is not divisible by 4. Wait, no, 60 is divisible by 4, it's 15.
Yeah.
So yeah, there would have been an election in 1960.
Yeah, so that means Kennedy was 3 years into his presidency when he got Harvey Oswalded.
Yeah, when he got grassy knolled.
Yeah.
What is it? Have a look at what one determined Marine and his rifle can do.
Yeah.
And to make the point, Lee Harvey Oswald was a shit shot for the Marines. Like, he barely passed his shooting thing.
Yeah.
Which is why there are so many conspiracies about the fact that there's no fucking way he made that shot.
Yeah.
I can put it down to pure dumb luck. But then again, my entire national identity is not bound up in what are the odds.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm not looking for a
Well,
bigger answer
plus
than
we already have a pet Kennedy conspiracy.
yeah. I mean, it is November. You can tell it if you want.
Yeah. Because, I mean, 3 days after Kennedy
No, the
was...
day after.
Oh, yeah, the day after Kennedy was assassinated, the first episode of Doctor Who aired. Coincidence?
Kennedy was a Time Lord!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting film. It's a psychological thriller for the most part.
Yeah.
Insofar as all satire is psychological thriller to some extent.
Yeah.
Like, we laugh at satire because it's funny and it's ridiculous and it's surreal.
Yeah.
But when satire is done this close to the bone and done so close to the reality, it stops being funny and it becomes frightening.
Yeah.
Because, let's be honest, incompetence is frightening in elected officials. We've seen how that shit goes down. And in military personnel as well, incompetence is the last thing you want. Which really confuses me as to why then they recruit from, kids with no other prospects and things like that. Because, those are not necessarily the kids who got the best school grades.
They recruit the enlisted from kids with no prospects.
Yeah. But then they recruit the officers from green kids who've just left university and think they know everything because they've got a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Which is, there's an argument for and against.
Yeah.
For me personally, if I was to design a rank structure and military progression, it would be that every enlisted person, soldier, whatever you want to call them, would have to start studying for a relevant college degree at enlistment.
Yeah.
And you only make officer once you've passed it and you've served your time as enlisted. That way you get the best of both worlds. You get the academic and you get the personal experience.
Yeah.
But that would be how I'd design it in an ideal world, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because a lot of enlisted people don't want to take a college degree, and why would you?
Yeah.
Especially in something related to a military career, if you don't want to make a career out of the military.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Again, satire can be a psychological thriller if you think too deeply about it. If you don't, it's a good giggle. But it'll still haunt your nightmares.
And, I'm gonna say, once again, especially the scenes with General Ripper, it's aged too well.
You know how in the 90s double denim came into fashion and then went out of fashion? And we all laughed at Justin Timberlake in double denim, and now people are wearing double denim again?
Yeah.
That's what's happened with this film. Like, it's come full circle.
So
bell-bottom
you're saying,
jeans and... Yeah.
So you're saying the Red Scare is the double denim of politics?
Pretty much, yeah. Anytime that there's an issue in politics, anytime there's division, just give people an enemy that they can't quite point a finger at and watch them tell on each other. It's how the Soviets did it. That's why they had people, informing on their own families and stuff.
Yeah.
Because,
you could definitely, in a theoretical, reboot, General Ripper could definitely be redone as a QAnon guy.
Yeah. Or an incel. 4chan incel. And you wouldn't have to change much except for the fact that the nuke and the doomsday device would actually be a computer virus.
Yeah.
Of some description. That takes out the world's infrastructure or the world's stock markets or something. In fact, I think that was an episode of Spooks. You know.
Yeah.
An electromagnet near the servers that run, I don't know, all the pacemakers in the world. Or near the servers that feed fibre optic cables for the internet. Yeah. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
It could be done really, really simply brought forward. But I don't think it would have the same impact as this film does in the modern day.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the impact of this film now is the fact that it's that old. And we're looking at it and we're kind of like, you know, why hasn't anything changed? I think the longer this film remains relevant or goes in and out of fashion and cycles through relevance, the more it's going to it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy in its relevance. It's relevant in its own time. It's relevant now because of the situation we're in. The more times we can look at this film at any given point in history going forward and say, this film is still relevant to our times.
Yeah.
The more we are going to make the film relevant because it will carry that extra gravitas of being something older. It will have the foreshadowing. It will be... The further away we get from the film being released, the more ridiculous it is that the film is still relevant.
Yeah, or in the words of the titular character, oh, it would be very simple, mein Führer. I mean, Mr. President.
Exactly. And look how close we came to that recently.
Yeah.
You know, and when we're getting books of people who were around in November, January in the White House.
Yeah.
You know, generals coming out and saying that they put orders in place to stop a potential nuclear war happening.
Yeah.
To countermand the president's orders if the president gave the order. You know, that to me is frightening. Because what if it was the other way around?
Yeah.
What if those generals were the wackadoo people who wanted to take over the world and the president didn't have the capacity to countermand that order?
Yeah.
And that's the only difference in that situation. And the fact that we've seen a situation and we've lived through a situation like that, most of us not knowing it was happening, you know, is frightening how close we came.
Yeah.
I would say probably November to January last year, this year, probably the closest we've been to potential nuclear war with China, war with some sort of, you know, I don't want to say broken bottle because that's not the right scam, but something that's going to set off Armageddon since the Cuban Missile Crisis, arguably.
Yeah.
Because we've never been at the point of the Cuban Missile Crisis, ever. Not with Russia, anyway. America and Russia have never been that close. There've been instances of cock-ups and shit, you know, the submarine Rain was talking about and things.
Yeah.
But it's not... I decided to quit smoking, so I'm fiddling.
Yeah.
Hell of a week to do it.
Yeah.
That to me is the frightening thing about this film.
Yeah.
It shows us what could be going on and we'd have no idea.
Yeah.
And it shows us how easy it would be for someone to do something like that.
And
I think that's about where I'm ready to wrap up, if you are.
Yeah. And it basically what we've seen so far in our exploration of Kubrick's filmography is he's a damn brilliant director if he doesn't let his own pretentious biases get in the way.
I would introduce some nuance to that comment and say that when Kubrick mitigates his pretentiousness and uses it in moderation,
Yeah.
he's an excellent satirist.
Yeah.
And that to me is what Full Metal Jacket and Doctor Strangelove have in common. They're both satires to an extent.
Yeah.
They're both satires, but they're both in a way psychological thrillers.
Yeah.
And again, that's Kubrick's niche. That's where Kubrick shines, showing us the reality of a fucked up situation that is just surreal enough that we can watch it with a degree of separation.
Yeah. So, and of course, join us next week where we close off Kubrick month by watching a full-on hissy fit as we cover Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus and so's my wife.
Yeah.
What are your pronouns? No. I'm Spartacus and so's my spouse.
Yeah. And just so you know, the schedule is going to be very wibbly wobbly, timey wimey for the next month or so.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Well, it is coming up to the holidays, so that's valid.
And also, let's see how close I am. Probably not very because let's see.
Don't forget, tell your friends, like, comment, and subscribe to Ring so we can do the Embarrassing Stories stream.
Yeah.
If it coincides with the holidays, there's no excuse not to have a drink while we do it.
And yeah, I've dropped back down to 14 left. So lost a couple in there somewhere.
Algorithm issues. But yeah. That to me, it's a satire, it's a psychological thriller like all the best satires are. And consider Kubrick's modest proposal. Yeah. Who are you in the dark and what would you do in these situations?
Yeah. And with that, I think we'll move to taglines.
You got anything to shill before we do?
Well, I did.
Well, other than that, what else are you doing on your channel? Tell me.
Yeah, so, secular D&D on Saturday. Aiming for around 11 my time, noon central. And of course, Meaty Musings next week. We're talking about Spartacus. Hey, you were the one who decided you could soldier on through your cough.
In my defense, I've done quite well.
Yeah. and but outside your defense, you chose this knowing that if we had to skip this week, there'd be no Spartacus.
You mean I made a decision and that decision led to negative consequences for me?
Yeah.
That are going to it that involve the Romans. So I'm Spartacus.
and next month we are talking about animation. I think we're kicking it off with The Road to El Dorado, but don't quote me on that because I don't have the list.
The list is here somewhere. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah. But all I know is we are covering The Road to El Dorado, Into the Spider-Verse, The Emperor's New Groove, and Brave. I'm just not sure which order.
Pull them out of a hat.
Yeah, so tune in next week for more information on that, because all of those movies are good.
Yeah. There's only one I haven't seen, but yeah, all those movies are good.
And with that, we'll go into taglines.
Cool. Well, as always from me, take care, be good, and if you can't be good, remember, use your noodle and don't press the nuclear button.
Yeah. And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.